6 days after Governor Scott Walker presents a $68 billion two-year spending plan, that's all funds, to the Assembly and Senate leaders, is a great time to have a Capitol Roundtable. So I want to thank my fellow Capitol reporter, Shawn Johnson of Wisconsin Public Radio, Mary Spicuzza of the Wisconsin State Journal, and Bob Hague, News Director of Wisconsin Radio Network. Well, okay, I haven't read the 638-page summary. I haven't read the 1,800-page actual bill, but I know that you have. Oh, yeah. Yep. But we have covered some of the fine print, the things we knew, and the things we didn't know. So here's my question. Toughest initiative in the governor's budget to get through the ledge? Bob.
Well, there's so many to choose from. I mean, seriously, right?
Well, I understand.
But I think it's the transportation bonding. Right out of the gate, at the briefing that was held just before the governor's budget address last week, both Speaker Voss and Representative Nygren, who of course is co-chair of Joint Finance, indicated they have some reservations about the level of bonding. Even though, let's not forget to mention this, because the governor has, it is at a 10-year low, the state's overall bonding. And then on the floor afterwards, I had a chance to talk real briefly with Senator Fitzgerald, and he again said, well, yeah, it's great that we're at the lowest level of bonding in years, but I have concerns.
John Nygren even went further. I get elected to solve problems, not push issues down the road. So your nomination, transportation budget. Mary?
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think transportation, and I also think the UW cuts are not going to be the $300 million that Walker proposed. I think that along with transportation, that it sounds like some lawmakers are working to maybe send a little bit more money towards the UW system. Governor Walker acknowledged that last week, that he expected more money to go to UW. It we might not know how much until some new revenue numbers come in, but I don't think that the whole kind of debacle with the Wisconsin idea helped too much last week, and maybe UW will get some more money just to...
Do you see, if there is additional revenues, Mary, do you see the UW system as having the first draw on any additional money?
I think Governor Walker mentioned UW system as well as K-12 public education. Right. So he said that, he's repeated this a few times in the past, where he said, no budget passes and is signed into law as it's proposed. I fully expect to work with lawmakers. I expect to see them putting more money into transportation, meaning less bonding, more money towards UW, and more money towards public education. So I would not be surprised by any of those.
I interviewed Regions President Falvo on Friday. And I'm sorry, on Thursday, and he indicated that watch this as this unfolds. Is it possible to dial down the 150 the first year and take a bigger cut the second year? By the way, I learned also that the authority kicks in the second year of the budget, July 1 of 16. I was under the wrong impression that it didn't kick in until July 1 of 2017, but the authority does kick in, however, with the block grant, the second year of the... But John, your turn. Biggest issue?
Biggest challenge, I think the bonding. I'm going to chime in on that as well. We've had a couple budget cycles now where either the governor's own administration, Department of Transportation, has kind of been tasked with, let's come up with long-term solutions to this transportation funding issue that we've got. And both times the governors basically turned them away. And so what we have now is $1.3 billion in bonding to deal with this issue, and you've heard every Republican leader say that's not acceptable. So what it looks like in the end, don't know, but it's not going to look like that. As far as where the money goes, if May is great, and the new revenue estimates show, well, we do have a lot more money to spend, you start talking about the dollar figures it would take to really offset these cuts. UW, $300 million over the biennium. I mean, public school funding is basically flat, but there's actually a decrease in year one of the budget.
Because they're not going to fund the $75 per pupil that was promised in the current budget.
But and then you go on and transportation, unless you get a big increase in gas tax revenue or something, then you're talking about using general fund money to fill a transportation hole. It's not easy. You would need a great re-estimate of revenues to figure out all these.
Okay, two of the three of you have come up with transportation, and Mary's kind of there too. But
oh yeah, no, I think transportation.
Okay,
too.
3-3. Sorry, I correct myself. But a little perspective. The current budget bonds $991 million for transportation. He's recommending an additional $1.3 billion. for transportation. Why can't Scott K. Walker pull a trigger in terms of recommending some type of more of a permanent funding solution? Bob, you want to jump in?
Well, he has consistently said that he is not interested in any sorts of tax hikes.
Is that because he's running for president?
Well,
that's a factor, isn't it?
It is a factor.
Okay,
I don't see how it can't be.
I interrupt you. Go ahead, finish.
No, I think that's exactly the direction I was going in. I think a lot of the decisions he has made over the past several weeks were not entirely coincidental, given to his increased profile in Iowa. And I think putting forward a budget proposal with a gas tax increase, would not have played well with the conservative Republican wing of the Iowa caucus voters.
Which just intrigues me, because there seems to be a real need in transportation. And what his budget says is, okay, Republican leaders, you want to make tough decisions? Because if you look at his transportation budget, it funds uppers for local governments, and it funds all the majors, from the Stillwater Bridge to the Hone Bridge to the widening of the interstate from Madison to Illinois. So he's in essence saying, GOP leaders, you want to be the bad guys? Do you want to delay projects, or you want to make the hard decisions? That's the way it looks to me. What do you think, Shawn?
Absolutely.
Okay.
He's put it in their court, and if they want revenue, it's going to have to be theirs. And I don't know if it would survive his veto pen. Maybe not. But he's definitely leaving it up to them to make those kinds of calls. And I think the presidential run has to be a huge factor. You look at who's kind of celebrating him on the national level now: Rush Limbaugh, Grover Norquist. They're saying he's the real deal. He's not just trying to be president right now. He's first got to win this very crowded Republican primary. So. He's tailoring his message and his policies toward that right now. So to support something like a gas tax increase, which he already rolled out, or even, a mileage-based registration fee. Yeah. One wonders
There's
how
about 10
the conservative base.
that he walked away from.
Yeah, one wonders how the Republican base would think about that in a state like Iowa.
Mary, do you think the GOP leaders will pull the trigger on some tax and fee increases for transportation?
I wouldn't be surprised if we see the idea of increased fees for hybrids, or I was calling it like the Madison tax almost, where we see a lot of the Priuses driving around, that sort of thing. I don't think that they are dying to do widespread tax increases. Governor Walker has said a bottom line for this budget is, I want property taxes to continue being lower. He can say he's cut taxes every year that he's been in office. I think it's $5 a year on the median value home right now.
Have you guys spent that yet? Go ahead, excuse me, Mary. Go ahead.
I think I have. Sadly, probably for 2 years. So he can, but I don't think. I think that there will be discussion, and that way, if things are added to the budget, they're not things he initially proposed. But he can say, I had to compromise. We needed to get this thing passed, but it's not his proposal. It's his proposal being changed.
Bob, you were saying.
All right. So here's the deal.
You were saying there's a pattern here.
To me, this budget is perhaps straight out of the playbook of Scott Walker, Milwaukee County executive, because the rub on him when he was Milwaukee County exec was always that he put forward the budget proposals that would hold the line on property taxes, and then leave it to the Board of Supervisors to come in
to pork it up.
To pork it up. Well, to pork it up, or to pay for what needed to get paid for.
Right.
And then he could say, see, I stood up for the taxpayers, and it was that darn legislative body that porked it up.
And so then he would have to stand with the veto pen to restore some fiscal sanity. So you see a pattern here.
That was a term someone I interviewed who had been in Milwaukee County with Governor Walker called it a certain type of budget that I probably can't say on Wisconsin Eye, but yeah.
Okay, and we appreciate that. 4 days later, this flap over rewriting the mission of the UW system, is that a two-cycle news story, or is that a bigger deal? I mean, when your draft language says, strikes the language, the mission of the UW system is to seek the truth, that's pretty, but the governor issued 3 separate statements, because now he's under national scrutiny, and the national pundits are big deal or little deal?
It's hard to say. I mean, I felt like that was kind of the worst day I had seen Governor Walker having possibly since the Coke phone call, in terms of the embarrassment factor of like everyone. I just felt like, you know, even Republicans, Democrats, university, it was striking not only the search for truth, but also, you know, this kind of mission to improve the human condition. And I feel like there's bipartisan agreement.
That's gone.
Who doesn't want to?
And it's replaced with the mission of the university is to educate the state's workforce.
And prepare for
which I think could have been written by WMC, but go ahead, finish your thought.
And you know, and Governor Walker did. He defended the change in De Pere, but then he later said that he thought it was just the addition that he was defending, and was not aware of the subtraction, and that it was essentially miscommunication and a drafting error. And he said, you know, no big deal. This is a drafting error. It'll be in. And then it became a very big deal, I would say, where they issued a much longer statement explaining how it happened, and that, you know, this essentially an aide misunderstood the directive from the governor's office, and
now the budget director is raising his hand to taking full blame.
Right.
And he still has a job. But your perspective on that, Bob?
Well, my observation was that the language that was struck, regardless of whether or not it was a drafting error, but again, the removal of that language, improving the human condition, the truth, again struck me as a move that would be viewed favorably by certain conservative voters in states other than Wisconsin.
So you see that as a little bit more sinister and deliberate.
Perhaps, maybe more cynical than sinister.
Shawn, I want to protect you. You work for the university, so you don't have to chip in on this, unless you want to.
I'm happy to, but you know.
Well, talk about the mission flap.
Yeah, the mission flap. I mean, I think it kind of maybe got some people's attention who weren't otherwise paying attention to the budget, and I think, while that language may be all tossed aside, and we didn't mean to delete any of that, it is sort of in line with the way that some Republicans think the university should be, you know, spending its money, and less of more of a focus on get a degree, help our economy, than on anything else.
Okay.
Speaker Voss once said it shouldn't be about the ancient mating rituals of whatever. It should be more focused on career. So I think there is an idea that there's kind of an esoteric.
I think the budget shop got the message and told the UW, keep it simple, and yes, rewrite the mission. But then at one point, under the third explanation the governor offered, the budget shop, the UW then questioned, do you really want to rewrite the mission? And the budget shop said, this is non-negotiable. If you're asking me whether the governor saw the new language, or even his chief of staff, who used to work for the UW, saw the language, I don't believe they did. So maybe I'm going along with the ups factor. Yeah. Any PSs on that?
Again, it just, the initial, when the story initially broke, my takeaway was, here's a thumb in the eye, Madison UW liberals, and oh, by the way, primary state voters, conservative primary state voters, are you catching this? You see how I handle these people?
But he goes back repeatedly, even on his Twitter account, and says this is a repeat of Act 10. So you remember when he campaigned, public employees are the haves, and rest of the taxpayers are the have-nots. And what did he do right after suggesting the cut to UW, saying, well, maybe profs could teach one more class?
Yeah.
And then the pushback from the UW, he doesn't really understand how higher education works. It's just fascinating. He gave a 25-minute budget message. I'm going to call it small ball. Washington was not mentioned. It was pretty folksy. He didn't dwell at length over some of these controversies. What are your thoughts on the actual message?
Well, I thought the absence of any Washington messaging or references was, frankly, he does have to appear to still be governing Wisconsin and working on Wisconsin's budget. I thought that was deliberate, that any mention of Washington would have been deemed inappropriate. Wait, what is he campaigning, or is he laying out our budget message?
So
he did talk about the American dream. He did say the American dream right here in Wisconsin. He talked about his humble upbringing and his parents. He talked about freedom and prosperity, our soldiers and our troops. So I felt like while there wasn't a Washington mention explicitly, I did feel like there were some national themes of, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, freedom and prosperity, American dream.
John, you think it was a small ball speech? That's my term, not yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you've covered the governor for a while, you notice that, like, he will, he's not trotting out a new talking point or message at every stop, right? They come out, you hear it, and then you hear it another few hundred times.
Yep.
Okay? So I just don't think he was going to use the budget to bring out the new material. I think if he thought the eyes of the nation were upon him, I mean, maybe he would have, but he's going to have plenty of those speeches, and I think that's probably where you're going to hear, the quote new material, or you're going to hear the new points that he's making. I mean, the budget, there was no new material in the budget in terms of, new vision or anything like that.
But I thought it was interesting, that he went off script at the end to praise the state's military members and veterans and veteran support groups. That was not in the prepared speech that we received.
He talked about that in Watertown last week, and it was interesting. He said, we give these copies of the prepared speeches out, and I didn't include those in the prepared remarks because I wanted people to pay attention. He wanted to kind of focus his comments on soldiers, so I thought that was interesting. I don't remember him leaving a long section of a speech out of prepared remarks before.
Right. I'm struck. Peter Bark and Robin Voss don't agree on much, but they agree that Walker should have approved the Kenosha Casino, and now they agree that we shouldn't bond $1.3 billion for transportation. So do you see the governor paying a price in the budget for these two decisions that the two assembly leaders are willing to publicly second guess? Is there a price to be paid?
I think with the Kenosha decision, I think really struck some lawmakers from that part of the state, the speaker included. They came out and very publicly said that was the wrong call.
Right. Samantha Kirkman joined him. It was bipartisan outrage. Excuse me for interrupting.
Yeah, I mean the legislature, with any governor, with the governors from the legislature's own party, there is a certain amount of, the legislature sort of does the heavy lifting and just kind of puts on a smile and says, "You got it." The governor's our guy. We think this is a good idea. That just goes on, but there's a give and take. You go there, you carry out the governor's policies, and you kind of get taken care of in one way or another, right? I mean, this Kenosha thing is something that they really wanted, and they did not get it. And I think it stings, and I think that may come back to make the governor's job more difficult.
Was the speaker surprised by the Kenosha casino decision, do you think?
I got the feeling, I don't think people really thought it was going to come out when it did. I think they thought there was going to be a little bit more time.
Oh, you mean 24 hours before he goes to Iowa to the Freedom Summit?
Right, I think that there were people who thought, like, well, there's going to be more back and forth with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the administration, and this will, kind of, it's been taking so long as it is, and then it just seemed like it, dropped, and it was, I think he was at a news event in the Milwaukee area, I want to say, and I think a lot of people were kind of caught off guard. Maybe not that he said, obviously there were Republican leaders who were upset that he said no, and Democrats, but I think also the timing caught people off guard, like he's saying no, and why is he saying no now?
I think Steve just answered why he said no at that particular point.
Provisions in the budget bill that surprised you. At the budget briefing, we were told he withdraws Wisconsin from Common Core after saying pre-election every district should be able to make the choice. So he went a little bit further in that. Turning the boards that oversee DATCAP and DNR into just making recommendations instead of making real decisions. Oversight for those agencies surprised me. But so those are two I'll throw out. Shawn, what surprised you?
The stewardship stuff was
Cutting
surprising.
off funding.
Yeah. To just basically end it, and a 13-year freeze on new purchases.
For the Gaylord Nelson Warren Knowles Stewardship
Right, yeah.
program.
That's a pretty big change.
Yeah.
And I mean, it sort of says, like, the Wisconsin government you used to know, no, this is a new day. I mean, we can't afford this, we're done with it.
So no new purchases till 2028, was that it?
Right, until 2028. I mean, and it's
Saying
not like
that
a hard date, but
saying
it's...
that debt service is eating up too much of the stewardship fund. Excuse me, Shawn.
Right.
Were you done with that issue?
Yeah.
Anything else? Any second nominees? If not, go ahead.
The corrections. Corrections funding getting cut in the way that it did. That's just, they've got funding for people that work in third shift in corrections towers. That's just something that hasn't typically been cut in the past. You don't want to cut the state's prison system.
Those are 60 jobs.
Yeah.
Arguing that inmates are generally asleep
So
from 11 to 6.
You got a shortfall, you got to get the money somewhere.
Yeah.
But that's not been a usual target.
Okay. 2 examples, Mary?
I would say the funding cuts to Wisconsin Public Television and Wisconsin Public Radio. It's $5 million from the Educational Communications Board. The governor's office said that they would continue to fund emergency services, Amber Alert,
and the tower maintenance.
And the tower maintenance. And I guess that if they're trimming here and there, it would just seem like an interesting cut. And he has said that he just thinks that there are other spending priorities. I guess there's a question of. There have been Republicans who have been obviously critical of public broadcasting, so that's kind of a question.
And your paper was on page 1 listing some of the programs that would lose their funding. Okay.
That's right.
Any second nominees for surprising provisions, Mary?
I think the DNR stuff, too.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I can't lie. I mean, the surprise for me was the way I learned about it was the cuts for public broadcasting.
It's $2.7 million
right.
It's now in the budget that would go away.
Yeah. Now, I just wanted to add on the conservation purchases. Speaker Voss, initially anyway, raised some concerns about that. And how did he put it? He said, I don't think that's a good idea in southeastern Wisconsin where there are such enormous development pressures that we not have the ability to set aside any property for that long.
I didn't have a chance to find it. Some other reporter found it. But this provision requiring DOJ to sign off when a district attorney or a judge wants to name a special prosecutor, is that fallout from the John Doe? I really haven't worked this issue. Has anybody?
I heard about it. It certainly could be. It doesn't seem to be, that we hear about local control and agencies kind of shaping their own destiny, and that seems to be a bit top-down to me,
Right. And the Judicial Commission would come under the Supreme Court, which may get a new Chief Justice, depending how voters vote on April 7th. There's a few surprises in here. Any other surprises come to mind?
I think those are the big ones.
If not, we're covering a governor who was ranked first in the Iowa poll, ahead of Rand Paul. And he was just, there was a poll out in East Coast state. He's number 3, behind Jeb Bush and Rand Paul. And does it surprise you that he's the flavor of the month or making some very favorable impressions to the GOP activists nationally?
It doesn't to me, no.
Really?
No. I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see how it goes, and if he kind of becomes kind of a front runner where there's a lot of friendly or unfriendly fire from his fellow Republicans that kind of bring him down. But I think for a while we've been hearing a lot of Republican activists saying, we want someone from outside Washington, D.C. There should be a governor, someone with executive experience, someone who's gone against the status quo. And I think in a lot of those cases, Governor Walker has been delivering that message, and it's also kind of like, oh, hey, that's me. So I think that he is, in many ways, a lot of those boxes are being checked in his favor.
Yeah.
Well, is he going to have 6 or 7 good months? Remember when Tommy Thompson, who was out of office, ran for president? 6th in the August Iowa straw poll, exit Tommy Thompson. So is he going to be hot for the next few months? What do you think, Bob?
Well, I don't know. That depends on what happens in the next 6 months. Who else gets into the race? What happens here? What the revenue collections are like here? How the budget battle shapes up? There's so many imponderables and tangibles. It's tough to say if he's still going to be riding high 6 months.
Whatever you think of him, he's a historical figure. When's the last time that a sitting governor gave a budget message as a candidate for president? So it's very interesting times, isn't it, Shawn?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really is. And now he's off to London for a trade mission. Is that a trade mission slash fact-finding for foreign policy? Or is it, am I reading too much into it?
I think that it certainly, he's going abroad. It's not exactly a war zone by any means, but Governor Christie was just there, who's also speculated to be another candidate. He just tweeted about a week ago about meeting with Kissinger. So all of those things, he's been wading more into ISIS and Cuba and foreign policy, and I think all of those things show that he is trying to develop more of a, impression that he's not just a governor, that he has some international experience.
He told Martha Raddatz that the United States should have a strike force to be ready to go after terrorists worldwide. That was pretty interesting.
And he wouldn't rule out boots on the ground in Syria?
He wouldn't rule out boots on the ground in Syria. So is it hard to cover a governor of Wisconsin who's campaigning for president? Have you guys
hard to keep up with him?
It's hard to keep up. Yeah, the unfolding Wisconsin idea messaging on Friday was very difficult to keep up with.
Right, right. You guys going to be able to devote much time to his presidential? Well, you've got. When he's in Iowa, can you ask Iowa Public Radio to feed you stuff?
We can, and we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that going to continue in New Hampshire and Oklahoma and
I
South
imagine,
Carolina?
We might have to get to know South Carolina Public Broadcasting and New Hampshire Public Broadcasting, and he's spending a lot of time there. And then just connected to what we're talking about here, you got to wonder if that has an effect on messaging for the Wisconsin idea thing. And I mean, you got a lot of balls in the air, right? You're juggling a lot of stuff, and you're trying to figure out what your positions are on foreign policy and how to articulate them, while at the same time trying to keep track of a gigantic budget bill.
Well, my theory is he comes back from the trade mission, and the budget is in the legislator's court. I mean, he can legitimately spend a lot of time on the road campaigning saying, I did my job.
Yeah.
It's my time to respond to what the legislature does to my budget. So, okay. Well.
So they better hurry up and get that budget done. So he did say he wanted the budget done quickly, and I think at one point we heard that he was hoping to have it through, was it joint finance by tax day or something? That was something. So this is he is definitely speeding up the process.
Mary, let's end on a different note. You interviewed you were just calling attention to a new term, the bill that would waive the 48 hours. Go ahead, explain that story. I find it fascinating. Yeah,
it was an interesting, I had not heard that term before. I was talking to Senator Van Wanggaard, who, with some of his fellow Republican lawmakers, is circulating a bill to repeal the 48-hour rule for the handgun purchase waiting period.
You have to wait 48 hours.
Correct. And he said that really with the fast background checks, it's really not needed anymore to wait that long. And he had an interesting term. He called it a time tax.
A time tax?
A time tax. It's a tax on the time of the purchaser and the handgun dealer to have to wait that 48 hours. You have to go back to the shop if you went there to purchase it. What if you live an hour away? And I had never heard the term time tax before.
I hadn't either. Bob, Shawn?
No, that's a new one.
Time tax.
Right.
So let's talk about what happens next. The Fiscal Bureau is already digging into the budget. It's going to take them at least 3, probably 4 weeks to come up with something. Are we going to see any key votes in the Assembly and Senate? Are there any non-budget issues perking up?
Well, there was a school accountability bill that was in the legislature. The Assembly had their version, the Senate had theirs. The governor stuck that in the budget.
Yes.
I don't know if it'll stay there, but
Voss says if there's no sanctions, it's coming out of the budget.
He did. Yeah, he was pretty firm about that. Remains pretty firm about that.
Right.
And the Senate seems to have no interest in that, and the governor seems to be okay with the Senate's position there. So, that's one of the biggies that was outstanding. And I don't know what that does for it.
Boy, are they far apart.
Leave it up to the parents, the governor says.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So we're all kind of waiting next for the Fiscal Bureau document, and I know you'll spend your time reading the 1,800-page actual budget.
Yeah. Our abundant free time will be devoted exclusively to that.
That's right. Yeah. Good luck with that. Okay. Thanks, Shawn. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Bob. That's Capitol Roundtable.